Mark lived a life defined by silence. In the quiet suburb he called home, the hum of passing cars and the occasional bark of a distant dog were the only sounds to break the monotony. Once surrounded by friends and family, the years had left him, alone, his days an endless loop of solitary meals and aimless evenings. Loss had taken its toll, and while his heart still beat, it had long forgotten how to hope. Then, one evening, a photograph changed everything. Scrolling through his phone, Mark's eyes fell on the image of a rescue dog posted by a local shelter. The dog's unkempt fur framed a pair of deep, searching eyes that seemed to ask for a second chance. Something in that gaze stirred a part of Mark he thought was gone, a flicker of connection, fragile but undeniable. The next morning he found himself at the shelter standing in front of a pen that held the scruffy dog from the photo. Their first meeting was quiet but profound. As Mark extended a hand, the dog's cautious sniff turned into a tentative wag of its tail, an unspoken agreement between two souls seeking solace. That moment marked the start of a journey neither could have predicted. The bond between man and dog would grow to heal wounds, bridge divides, and inspire transformations neither had believed possible. Together, they would rewrite each other's stories, proving that even in the darkest of times, the smallest act of love can reignite the light of hope. Mark's life had not always been so solitary. Once he had a bustling home filled with laughter, shared meals, and plans for the future. But a series of events over the years chipped away at the joy that had once defined his days. The loss of his wife in a sudden accident was the first blow, one that left a gaping hole in his heart. In the months that followed, the distance between him and his grown children widened as they pursued their own lives far from home. Friends who had been his anchors slowly drifted away, leaving him with a sense of isolation that grew heavier with time. The once bright home he and his wife had built together now felt like a shell, its walls echoing with silence. Mark threw himself into his work, hoping that long hours and tight schedules might distract him from the ache of loneliness. But even his career, once a source of pride, had begun to feel hollow. Retirement loomed on the horizon, and with it, the realization that he had no clear purpose to fill the empty hours of the days to come. The small pleasures he once enjoyed, gardening, reading, or taking long walks, had lost their luster. Even simple social interactions became a challenge, as he struggled to find the motivation to engage with the world. Over time, the solitude turned into a kind of comfort, albeit one that quietly sapped his spirit. One rainy evening, while absent-mindedly scrolling through social media, Mark came across a post from a local animal shelter. It featured a scruffy dog with kind but tired eyes accompanied by a caption, "Looking for a second chance." The words resonated deeply with Mark, mirroring his own unspoken desire for connection and renewal. He stared at the dog's picture for a long time, feeling a tug of something he hadn't experienced in years: hope. For days, Mark wrestled with the idea of visiting the shelter. Doubts plagued him. What if he wasn't ready for the responsibility? What if the dog didn't like him? What if this was a mistake? But as the days turned into nights and the loneliness pressed heavier on his chest, he realized that doing nothing felt like a greater risk than trying. On a quiet Saturday morning, Mark made his way to the shelter. As he parked his car and sat in the lot, a wave of hesitation washed over him. The thought of walking into a crowded room filled with people and animals felt overwhelming, yet deep inside he knew he needed to take the step, even if it terrified him. With a deep breath, he opened the car door and walked into the shelter, unaware that this single decision would change not just his life, but also that of an abandoned dog waiting for a home. Inside, the chatter of staff and the occasional bark filled the air. Mark hesitantly approached the front desk, his voice barely audible as he asked about the dog he had seen in the post. A kind volunteer led him to a quiet corner of the shelter where the scruffy dog lay curled up in his pen. When their eyes met, Mark felt an instant connection, as if both understood the unspoken struggles the other carried. In that moment, Mark's hesitation faded. For the first time in years, he felt a flicker of purpose. He extended a hand toward the dog, and though the animal initially flinched, a tentative sniff and a wagging tail followed. Mark knew deep down that they had found each other for a reason. This was the beginning of a bond that neither of them could have foreseen, but both desperately needed. The rescue dog, later named Buddy, had known a life of hardship long before finding his way to the shelter. He had been born in a small rural area where neglect and indifference toward animals were all too common. His earliest days were spent in a makeshift backyard kennel where food was scarce and shelter from the elements was even scarcer. As a puppy, Buddy had an unrelenting spirit, chasing butterflies and wagging his tail at any passerby. But his enthusiasm for life was met with indifference from his owner. As he grew, Buddy's needs became a burden to the household. He was left alone for hours, often chained to a fence with only a shallow bowl of water that would frequently tip over in the wind. When he developed a limp after an untreated injury to his back leg, his owner decided he was no longer worth the effort. One day, Buddy was driven to a remote area and abandoned, left to fend for himself. The following weeks were a fight for survival. Buddy scavenged for scraps in trash bins, dodged speeding cars on busy roads, and found refuge under porches during wild storms. His once golden fur became matted with dirt, and his injured leg made it difficult to outrun dangers. Yet, despite the cruelty of his circumstances, his spirit remained unbroken. He greeted strangers with a cautious wag of his tail, hoping for kindness. It was this enduring hope that eventually led him to safety. Buddy was found by a kind passerby, who noticed him limping near a convenience store. Malnourished and covered in scratches, he was taken to the local shelter, where he was given food, medical care, and a temporary place to rest. The veterinarians discovered that his limp was the result of a fracture that had healed improperly, leaving him with a slight but permanent disability. Despite his past, Buddy's gentle nature and resilience captivated the shelter staff. For weeks, Buddy waited in his kennel as potential adopters came and went. Many overlooked him in favor of younger, healthier dogs. Others were deterred by his limp, assuming he would require too much care. But Buddy remained hopeful. His tail wagged whenever someone passed by, and he greeted each visitor with the same gentle curiosity. Then came the day Mark walked into the shelter. Unlike others who passed Buddy's kennel without a second glance, Mark stopped. The connection was instant. Buddy, sensing something different in this quiet man, wagged his tail softly and tilted his head as Mark crouched down to meet his gaze. For Mark, Buddy's tired but hopeful eyes mirrored his own. They were two beings who had endured hardship, yet still held on to the possibility of better days. When Mark extended his hand toward the bars, Buddy hesitated for only a moment before leaning forward to sniff it. Encouraged by the man's calm demeanor, Buddy offered a tentative lick. The small gesture was enough to confirm what Mark already felt. This dog was special. The shelter volunteer, who had been quietly observing, smiled and shared Buddy's story. She spoke of his rough start in life, his resilience, and his enduring kindness despite everything he had endured. Mark listened intently, feeling an ache of empathy for the dog who had been through so much. As he learned about Buddy's past, Mark couldn't help but see parallels to his own life. The loneliness, the struggles, and the need for a fresh start. When the volunteer asked if he wanted to spend some time with Buddy outside the kennel, Mark nodded. In the fenced yard, Buddy limped toward Mark with cautious enthusiasm, his tail wagging slowly but surely. Mark knelt on the ground, allowing Buddy to approach on his terms. The dog sniffed his hands, then his coat, before sitting down beside him with a quiet sigh as if to say, "I trust you." That moment solidified the bond between them. For Buddy, it was the first time he had felt safe in a long time. For Mark, it was a reminder of the joy that could be found in connection. As they sat together in the yard, the staff watched the scene with quiet smiles, knowing that something special was unfolding. Buddy's journey from neglect and abandonment to a hopeful new beginning was far from over. But in Mark, he had found someone who saw past his scars and imperfections. And in Buddy, Mark found a companion who understood what it meant to fight through life's challenges and still choose to love. When Mark brought Buddy home, both man and dog faced the daunting challenge of adjusting to their new life together. The quiet house, once a reminder of Mark's solitude, now echoed with the soft patter of Buddy's paws and the occasional thump of his tail. But despite the initial excitement of adoption, the first few weeks were anything but easy. Buddy's past experiences had left him cautious and skittish. Loud noises, sudden movements, or even the clatter of a dish startled him, sending him scurrying to the safety of his bed. Mark, too, felt out of his depth. It had been years since he'd shared his space with another living being, and he worried about doing things right. Yet, despite their uncertainties, there was an unspoken understanding between them, a mutual commitment to making this new life work. Mark quickly realized that building trust would take time. Every morning he made it a point to sit near Buddy's bed, speaking to him in soft, reassuring tones. At first, Buddy watched him warily, his body tense and ready to retreat. But gradually the dog began to relax, inching closer until one day he rested his head on Mark's knee. That small gesture of trust marked a significant milestone in their growing bond. Establishing a routine was another challenge. Buddy, unused to regular meals or a structured environment, often ignored the food Mark placed in his bowl, eating only when hunger overcame him. Walks were equally unpredictable. Buddy's limp made him hesitant to explore, and he frequently stopped to glance nervously at his surroundings. But Mark was patient. Each day, he encouraged Buddy to take a few more steps, rewarding him with gentle praise and a soft pat on the head. Over time, Buddy began to look forward to their outings, wagging his tail whenever Mark reached for the leash. Amid the challenges, there were moments of joy that reminded Mark why he had taken this leap of faith. One evening, as Mark sat reading on the couch, Buddy approached him with a small, tattered toy he had found in his bed. The dog placed it at Mark's feet, his eyes bright with an unspoken invitation to play. Laughing for the first time in what felt like years, Mark tossed the toy across the room. Buddy hobbled after it with surprising enthusiasm, bringing it back with a proud wag of his tail. It was a simple game, but it marked the beginning of a shared joy that would come to define their relationship. Buddy's presence also began to transform Mark's daily life in unexpected ways. The once dreaded mornings, which Mark spent alone with his coffee and a hollow sense of purpose, became moments he looked forward to. Buddy would greet him with a wagging tail, ready to start the day. Together they established new rituals, morning walks through the neighborhood, afternoons spent tending the garden, with Buddy happily sniffing around, and quiet evenings on the couch, where Buddy would curl up beside Mark, his steady breathing a comforting rhythm. Mark noticed changes within himself too. The heavy weight of loneliness that had shadowed him for years began to lift, replaced by a sense of connection and responsibility. Caring for Buddy gave him a renewed sense of purpose, a reason to get up each morning and embrace the day. In Buddy's unwavering trust and affection, Mark found a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit, the ability to heal and grow even after life's most difficult trials. Buddy, too, began to blossom in his new home. The once timid dog, who had cowered at every unfamiliar sound, started to explore his surroundings with curiosity. He followed Mark from room to room, his limp no longer a sign of weakness, but a testament to his determination. Buddy's unique way of bringing positivity into Mark's life became evident in countless small ways. He would rest his head on Mark's lap when he sensed the man was feeling down or nudge his hand with his nose, a gentle reminder that he was not alone. One particularly touching moment came during a walk in the park. A group of children, intrigued by Buddy's limp and sweet demeanor, approached cautiously. Mark hesitated, worried Buddy might feel overwhelmed. But to his surprise, Buddy greeted the children with a wagging tail, leaning into their gentle pats and soaking up their affection. It was a poignant reminder of the dog's incredible capacity for trust, even after all he had endured. As the weeks turned into months, the parallels between Mark and Buddy's journeys became increasingly clear. Both had faced loss and adversity, yet both had found the courage to open their hearts again. In caring for Buddy, Mark began to heal his own wounds, finding strength in their shared resilience. And in Mark, Buddy discovered the love and stability he had always deserved. Their bond, forged through patience, trust, and countless small moments of connection, became a testament to the transformative power of companionship. In the weeks and months following Buddy's adoption, there were moments that stood out, small, quiet milestones that spoke volumes about the transformation unfolding in both Mark and his new companion. While their bond had already begun to grow, these pivotal moments cemented the profound impact they had on each other's lives. One such moment came during an early morning walk. Mark had always avoided the park in his neighborhood, finding it a painful reminder of happier times when he and his late wife would picnic or stroll hand in hand. But Buddy's excitement as they approached the park gates was contagious. His tail wagged furiously, and his eyes sparkled with a kind of joy that Mark couldn't resist. Tentatively, Mark followed Buddy down the tree-lined paths, their steps in sync. As they walked, something shifted in Mark. He began to notice the crispness of the air, the golden hue of the sun filtering through the trees and the cheerful chatter of birds overhead. Buddy, undeterred by his limp, trotted ahead, pausing occasionally to sniff a patch of grass or investigate a rustling bush. His enthusiasm was infectious, pulling Mark out of his fog of grief and into the present moment. For the first time in years, Mark felt a glimmer of joy, a reminder that the world still held beauty even in its simplest forms. Another transformative moment came on an afternoon when Mark decided to visit a bustling farmer's market in town. Social events like these were something he had long avoided, preferring the comfort of his own home to the vulnerability of being among strangers. But Buddy's boundless energy and curiosity encouraged Mark to step out of his comfort zone. Holding Buddy's leash, Mark navigated the crowd, feeling a mixture of nervousness and exhilaration. Buddy, ever the charmer, quickly became the center of attention. Shoppers paused to pet him, asking about his story and marveling at his sweet demeanor despite his limp. Mark found himself talking to strangers, something he hadn't done in years. He shared Buddy's story, each word coming easier than the last. By the end of the day, Mark realized that Buddy hadn't just brought him to the market. He had brought him back to people, back to connection. Perhaps the most profound turning point came during an evening thunderstorm. Mark, who had grown used to Buddy's gentle companionship, noticed the dog pacing anxiously as the storm raged outside. Flashes of lightning lit up the room and thunder boomed in the distance. Buddy whimpered softly, his usual calm demeanor replaced by visible unease. Mark knelt beside him, stroking his fur and whispering soothing words. He realized in that moment that Buddy wasn't the only one in need of comfort. Mark had always struggled with his own emotions, particularly on stormy nights that seemed to amplify the quiet in his home. But as he comforted Buddy, he found that the act of soothing another had a calming effect on him as well. They sat together, man and dog, weathering the storm as a team. When the thunder finally subsided, Buddy rested his head on Mark's lap, his trust in the man evident in his steady breathing. For Mark, the experience was a reminder of the healing power of caring for another being. Buddy's unique ability to navigate emotional challenges shone through in countless other ways. On particularly difficult days, when memories of the past threatened to overwhelm Mark, Buddy seemed to sense his turmoil. He would nudge Mark's hand with his nose or rest his head on his knee, a quiet, grounding presence that reminded Mark he wasn't alone. In those moments, Buddy's unwavering loyalty and love provided a lifeline, pulling Mark out of his darkest thoughts. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, Mark looked at Buddy and felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. He realized how much his life had changed since adopting the scruffy dog. The isolation and grief that had once consumed him now felt like distant shadows, replaced by a newfound sense of purpose and connection. Buddy, with his resilient spirit and boundless capacity for love, had shown Mark that even the heaviest burdens could be lightened with the right companion by your side. Buddy, too, had undergone a transformation. The timid dog who had once flinched at every sudden movement now walked confidently beside Mark, his tail wagging and his eyes bright. Together, they had created a life filled with simple pleasures, morning walks, shared meals, and quiet evenings. Each day brought new moments of connection, further strengthening the bond between them. Their journey wasn't without its challenges, but it was those very challenges that deepened their relationship. In Buddy, Mark found not just a pet, but a partner, a teacher, and a friend. And in Mark, Buddy found a home, not just a physical space, but a place where he was loved, understood, and cherished. Mark and Buddy's story did not remain confined to the walls of their home. Their growing bond began to ripple outward, touching the lives of those around them in unexpected ways. Mark's neighbors, who had grown used to his reclusive nature, were the first to notice the change. They saw him walking Buddy each morning, his once solemn expression replaced by a quiet smile. Children in the neighborhood were drawn to Buddy's friendly demeanor, often running up to pet him and chat with Mark. For the first time in years, Mark found himself exchanging pleasantries, even stopping for conversations that rekindled his sense of connection to the community. Inspired by his journey with Buddy, Mark began volunteering at the very shelter where he had first met his companion. What started as a few hours a week soon became a passionate commitment. Mark shared Buddy's story with prospective adopters, encouraging them to look beyond an animal's imperfections to see their potential for love and companionship. His heartfelt accounts of Buddy's transformation struck a chord with visitors, leading to several animals finding homes. Mark also worked with the shelter to create a program aimed at raising awareness about adopting special needs animals. Using Buddy as a shining example, he helped demonstrate that disabilities or scars did not diminish an animal's capacity for joy or affection. Buddy became the unofficial ambassador of the shelter, attending adoption events and winning hearts with his gentle nature and wagging tail. The impact of their story extended even further when a local journalist wrote an article about Mark and Buddy, highlighting how their bond had not only transformed their lives but also inspired a community to view rescue animals in a new light. Donations to the shelter increased, and several families who had been hesitant about adopting visited the shelter to find their own Buddy. Through their journey, Mark and Buddy proved that love and companionship could create a chain reaction of positivity. What began as a quiet effort to heal two broken souls evolved into a movement that brought hope to countless others, both human and animal alike. Mark and Buddy had settled into a life of mutual care and joy, their days filled with routine and companionship. But life, as it often does, had a way of testing even the strongest bonds. One crisp autumn morning, during their usual walk through the neighborhood park, Mark noticed something unusual. Buddy, typically eager and curious despite his limp, seemed sluggish and disoriented. His steps were unsteady, and his tail, usually wagging with excitement, hung low. Mark immediately took Buddy to the veterinarian, his heart pounding with worry. After a series of tests, the vet delivered sobering news. Buddy was experiencing complications from an underlying condition tied to his earlier injury and malnutrition. While treatable, the road to recovery would require surgery, medication, and weeks of careful monitoring. Mark, who had grown to love Buddy like family, didn't hesitate. He assured the vet that he would do whatever it took to ensure Buddy's recovery. The weeks that followed were some of the most challenging they had faced together. Buddy's surgery was successful, but the recovery process was slow and arduous. For the first few days, Buddy could barely move, his usual energy replaced by exhaustion. Mark, determined to help his companion heal, adjusted his entire routine to care for Buddy. He prepared special meals, administered medication, and stayed by Buddy's side, offering gentle reassurances and affection. But the challenge wasn't just physical, it was emotional as well. Seeing Buddy in pain brought back memories of the losses Mark had endured, stirring fears of being alone again. Yet every time those thoughts threatened to overwhelm him, Buddy's resilience reminded Mark of their shared strength. Despite his discomfort, Buddy would wag his tail weakly whenever Mark entered the room, a silent gesture of trust and gratitude that bolstered Mark's resolve. As the days turned into weeks, Buddy began to improve. His steps grew steadier, and his playful spirit slowly returned. One evening, as Mark sat on the floor beside him, Buddy nudged a toy toward him, a small but significant sign that he was ready to embrace life again. Overcome with emotion, Mark realized how far they had come together. Buddy's recovery wasn't just a testament to the dog's strength, but also to the bond they had built, a bond forged in love, patience, and mutual healing. The ordeal brought unexpected changes to Mark as well. Caring for Buddy during his recovery deepened Mark's sense of purpose and resilience. He realized that in helping Buddy heal, he had also confronted his own fears and rediscovered his capacity for hope. Their shared challenge had transformed them both, reinforcing the idea that even in the face of adversity, trust and love could overcome the greatest obstacles. When Buddy finally returned to his full energy, their first walk back to the park felt like a victory lap. The sunlight filtering through the trees, the crisp air, and Buddy's wagging tail were reminders of what they had overcome. Together, they had faced a formidable challenge and emerged stronger, their bond unbreakable, and their journey an enduring testament to the power of resilience and trust. Months after Buddy's recovery, Mark and his loyal companion had fully settled into their new rhythm of life. The bond they had forged during their journey together had grown into an unshakable partnership. Mark, once a man defined by loneliness, now radiated a quiet contentment. Buddy, too, had blossomed into a confident and joyful dog, his past struggles no longer visible in his steady stride or wagging tail. Their days were filled with simple yet profound moments that spoke to the depth of their connection. Morning walks in the park became opportunities for Buddy to explore with renewed energy, his enthusiasm drawing smiles from passers-by. Mark, no longer hesitant or withdrawn, stopped to chat with neighbors, sharing Buddy's story and the lessons they had learned together. Mark's home, once a place of emptiness, now felt alive. The once quiet evenings were filled with the comforting sound of Buddy's paws patting across the floor, or his contented sighs as he lay beside Mark. Together, they had created a life filled with companionship, trust, and purpose. One particularly poignant moment came during a visit to the park on a bright spring afternoon. As they sat on a bench overlooking a blooming meadow, Buddy rested his head on Mark's knee, his eyes half closed in peaceful contentment. Mark gently stroked Buddy's fur, reflecting on how far they had come. The man who had once been consumed by grief and the dog who had been abandoned and forgotten had found healing in each other. Their shared journey had transformed them both, proving that love and trust could mend even the deepest wounds. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the park, Mark looked down at Buddy and smiled. "We saved each other, didn't we, boy?" he said softly. Buddy responded with a wag of his tail as if to say, "Yes, we did." Their story, while deeply personal, carried a universal message, that the most profound connections can arise from the simplest acts of kindness. Together, they were a testament to the enduring power of companionship and the remarkable capacity of love to heal, transform, and inspire. Mark and Buddy's journey didn't just transform their own lives, it sparked a deeper purpose in Mark. Inspired by his experience, Mark became a passionate advocate for rescue animals, determined to give back to the community that had given him Buddy. He began volunteering regularly at the shelter, sharing his story with adopters who were hesitant about taking on animals with special needs. Buddy often accompanied him, serving as a living testament to the incredible transformations that love and care could achieve. Mark also started a local awareness campaign, partnering with the shelter to host events that highlighted the importance of adopting rescue animals. Through these efforts, he encouraged others to look beyond superficial imperfections and see the unique value of each animal. Buddy became the face of this campaign, his heartwarming story resonating with families and individuals who had once been unsure about adopting. One of Mark's proudest moments came when a young couple, inspired by Buddy's story, adopted a senior dog that had been overlooked for months. Seeing the joy in the couple's eyes as they bonded with their new companion reminded Mark of the countless lives that could be changed through adoption, both human and animal. In his talks and articles, Mark emphasized the lessons he had learned, that every animal, regardless of its past or challenges, has the capacity to love and be loved. He spoke of the healing power of these relationships and the profound impact they could have on both sides. As Mark and Buddy continued their journey, their message was clear. Opening your heart to a rescue animal isn't just an act of kindness. It's an opportunity to transform your life. And for those still considering adoption, Mark offered one simple piece of advice. Take the leap. You'll find that sometimes the ones you save end up saving you too.